forward to this computer. Okay, so Rails is different than other web technologies. The first thing to note is Rails is written in a language called Ruby. Now, that is different than what we've taught you so far. I've told you that web browsers only understand how to parse HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. A web browser has no idea what to do with Ruby code. And that's fine, because the way Ruby works is that it assembles the web pages on the backend on the server, and then you can reach out. Either it sends the web pages fully constructed to the user, or you set up your Rails app as an API. And you access it through regular API calls. And Rails is good for both of those. Let me just pull this in for a second here. Okay, so you've all seen this diagram, no doubt. This is model view controller. Rails lives and breathes model view controller. With JavaScript, you can do pretty much whatever you want. You can program however you want to program JavaScript. Ruby on Rails, on the other hand, only lets you do things one way, and that's the Rails way. So they say that it is superior because it is convention over, now what's it called? You don't think I'm sharing my screen. I'm not. All right, obviously I am going back to school at some point to learn how to internet. Model view controller. So yes, Rails has this philosophy of convention over configuration, which means where you put your files in a Rails application, that it can have different functionality depending on where that file is. So in a Node application, you can import files, and you have to, do the imports. In Rails, you're not going to see imports. You're going to see files in individual places where you will go and you will. So, for instance, all of your controllers will be in a controllers folder. All of your models in a model folder. And guess where your views are? Yes, in the views folder. So let's do the fun stuff and create an app. So I'm just going to close that. Okay. And I'm going to go into my, not there. Lighthouse Labs. Okay. Let me know if the font size is too small for you. Okay, so I'm here, and what I'm going to do is create an app. So let's do that. I have Rails installed on this machine already, and I can have a look. I've got Rails version 6.1.5. Version 7 released very recently. I'm not going to use 7, I'm going to use 6.1.5, which I believe is the latest of the previous revision. There are breaking changes between 6 and 7, so 6 is safer. And also, because it runs on Ruby, I should check to see what version. Yep, 2.6.6, which is coincidentally the version I use at work. So that's what I'm going to use today. Okay, so generating an app is very similar to generating a React app. Rails new, and we'll give it, and we'll call it Rails for beginners. Okay. And again, my wife considers all this text scrolling by to be cheating. Nobody's going to have a chance to read all of that as it zips by. But what's happening is it's pulling in all of the packages over my internet connection and it's installing what we call gem files. And gems are very similar to NPM modules, right? So you go use NPM to install node modules. Here, you install gems for Ruby gems. There's all sorts of lame humor. Okay, super. So we now have our app up and running. Let's go into it. And I'm just going to, all right. Yeah, there we are. Rails for beginners. Okay. Remember when you did React and you start and there were a million files that were created? All right, hold on to your hats because—
Sorry, John, what was the command to create the app there?
Rails, new, and then the name of the app.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so let's go through and have a look at what we've got here before I even start going through everything. So let's start with the gem file. And here are, again, this is very similar to the package.json, but this is for Rails. And this gives us all of the gems that are installed by default and some version numbers. And you'll actually see a gemfile.lock, which is very similar to the package.lock.json or the yarn.lock file. So this will make sure that every time you install the gems for your application, it's going to be using the same versions. Mismatched versions are a bad time for everyone. What else do we have here? We do have a package.json as well, and that's if we want to use JavaScript. JavaScript is enabled by default, but we're not going to use that today. We're going to do everything just with the regular Ruby. Rake files, this is for tasks. And I'll get into that in a little bit. It's sort of like the part of the package.json which has the scripts. All right. Let's go into config first because it's not as bad. And bad's a strong word. It's not as populated. And in here, we have different Ruby files and other types of files, YAML, for instance, where we've got information about how we've set up our app. So by default, for instance, I am using SQLite 3 for my database. If I passed in a flag, so Rails new app -- data equals MySQL or Postgres, then it will install the proper hooks in order to connect to one of those databases. But for making a quick app, SQLite does everything we want. The SQLite, by the way, is just SQL, with the exception that here, is it here? It will be here under the DB folder will be the data file. So you don't have to install a separate instance of SQLite. Ruby will just install everything for you. All right. And I can't put it off any longer. Here is the app folder, and here is where the bulk of your programming will go. So the first thing we're going to look at is models. And in here, we have a model, and this is a class. So this says application record inherits from active record : base. So this is just a way of specifying a class within a class. So you can have multiple embedded classes. That's not so important. You're almost never going to have to go into this file. If you have any JavaScript, it will go in here, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. Controllers. And very similar, we have a controller which descends from the action controller base. So in Rails, classes, or every class, descends from another class, very similar to JavaScript. And finally, down here, we have our views. And there are not that many views right now. There's just a layout. So let's get this started. Okay, and terminal. And the way we run it, so I'm going to actually run a command that always run this command to start. You're going to see some places where it says just run Rails server or Rails S. It is always better to run bundle exec and then the command. So in this case, Rails S for serve. Oh, and it helps if I can spell Rails with an S. All right. Let me just move that out of the way. I see the exiting. Somebody doesn't like me. Address already in use. Yes, yes, the address is already in use. Let me turn that off. There. So unlike Node and React, that's very forgiving if the port that you want to start on is in use. Just says, oh, you want to use an export. Rails isn't like that. You do it the Rails way or go the highway. So I've got my Rails app running. Let's actually show a, let's grab a web browser window. And we're going to go to local host, local host 3000. There we go. And you see this little, you see all these happy people. If you are using 7, they've changed this page, but it doesn't really do anything. All it tells us is that I'm using Rails 6.1.5, and here's the Ruby version that I'm using. So that's it for now. Okay.
Hey, John, can you increase the size of the of VS Code?
Yes, please. Yeah, no worries. No worries. That better?
Yeah, that seems good.
All right. There's a balance point between being able to show you and having enough screen real estate. I'm sure everybody's run into the screen real estate problem. Now you understand why developers have 3 and 4 monitors all around them, because we need them. All right, so we are running, and you'll notice that we've now got this development.sqlite3 file down here. And this is actually the file for the database. So it doesn't live in the operating system like Postgres. This lives right in the app. So I can access all of my data directly. And we can still use regular SQL commands to access all of this stuff. So what I can do actually, let's go. So I've got, sorry, I'm just trying to remember what I think it is SQLite 3 DB / development .SQLite. Woot. And this is a SQL prompt. So for instance, I can, everything works slightly differently. So I believe if I do, right, .help. And these are similar to the / commands you saw in Postgres. Help commands are your friend. And here we've got all of the, now I could show you the tables, but they're not going to be many. As a matter of fact, there are none. Makes sense. I haven't added any data to or asked for anything in the database. All right. So let's go back and let's have our Rails app do something. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build what we call a model. And a model is where we keep information or our data, or how we describe our data. Okay. So let me open up a new terminal. All right. And we're going to use the Rails G, and I better do bundle exec Rails G. And what I'm going to actually say is I'm going to just say model for now. So I am using Rails to G or generate. Let's say generate model. And now let's have the name of a model. So, what sort of app should we build? I don't know. Let's build an app with characters in it. So actually, the convention is to always make your model names singular rather than plural. So I'm going to run this command. And Rails quite nicely adds a few things for us. So the first thing it adds is a character model file. Also adds some tests. I'm not going to get into tests, but Rails is very into writing tests. So it's built to do test-driven development. And I've got this file, and this is what we call a migration. Okay. Let's have a look at that file. Okay, so here is one of the pains of Rails, is all of a sudden it gets very difficult to find the files that you're looking for. So I know that I need to go into DB and into this migrate folder, and I'm going to check this. And here is where the information for my model is set. So we've got this change method that we're creating on this create characters class. And the only thing we're adding to it right now is this t.timestamps. And this is the created and modified fields. Rails gives it to you for basically free. Also, you don't need to put in an ID. Rails will give you an ID for everything that you add. So let's add our own. So I'm going to do, let me see. Let me just check my cheat sheet, make sure I'm doing it right. Right. So here I'm going to create another field. I'm going to make it a type string. And I'm going to call the field name. Every character has a name, so let's put that there. Let's also give the character, I don't know, T dot, is it number or integer? I think it's number. And we're going to give it power.
So a model is like a representation of the table in the app, is that right?
Exactly, exactly. So I can do all of my setup for the model here. I can also, when I'm generating the model, I could just say, what is it? Or I could say name colon string and power colon number, and it will just generate it with those columns for me. But I am not going to do that right now. Okay. Also notice that when I created the what we call a migration file, Rails automatically prepends it with a timestamp. And the reason for this is that when you run your migrations, they happen in time order. So the oldest one goes first. You can change the name if you want to swap the order of how things get migrated. Let's do the migration. Exec Rails DB migrate. You might find some online texts that instead of running bundle exec Rails, it'll say rake for DB migrate. Rails 6 brought a lot of the things that used to be under rake, under Rails, just makes our lives easier, so you don't have to remember which one is which. So let's run the migration. And oh, number was incorrect. Oh, I feel silly. Hold on. It is integer. There we go. Perfect. So you will see that everything goes properly when you see migrating. We've got a create table. This is running create table inside Sql. And we now have create characters was migrated. It took almost no time. All right, let's come back here. That's good. Let's go here. And now if I do dot tables, you can see that now there are tables in my SQLite database. You can do all of your Rails and not write a single line of SQL code. But I just wanted to show you that everything is done for you behind the scenes. There's a lot of magic in Rails. Things happen, you're not sure why, but they do, and you just have to learn to accept. Okay. All right, so let's have a look now at the model. So here I've got this character.rb model. There's not really much. It inherits from the application record class. So that means all of application records methods are being inherited by character. And what else? We don't have a view because we've not created one yet. And we don't have a controller because we haven't created one yet. You might not always need a controller for every table. It very much depend on how you want to have things run in your app.
Okay. John?
Yeah.
With React, when we started learning, we saw a lot of people, when you look at a lot of React tutorials and stuff, you often see people starting by saying, okay, let's clean up React, like what they give you to start. Do you have any tips on like what we should get rid of?
No, don't get rid of any. Unless you know you absolutely don't need it, don't get rid of things. So if you know, for instance, that you're never going to use a mailer in your app, you can get rid of these. So what a mailer is, it just sends an email for you. A little bit of configuration, you can send an email. So, but in general, just leave things the way they are. And it makes your life easier.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, that does make production Rails apps kind of large and perhaps unwieldy. But that's something else we'll deal with later. All right, so we've created our singular model character, but obviously characters are boring without something to do. So let's go, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a Ruby gem faker. And what this is a way of generating fake data to populate your app with. There are similar ones for Node, and one in Node is called Faker.js, but this is the Ruby version, and it is pretty cool. So what we're going to do is we're just going to follow the instructions, which is gem install faker. Okay. So when you install a gem, you should turn off your app. I can type. And here we go. We have faker, and we can actually look in our gem file, and we should see right in here somewhere. Oh, didn't get, oh, that's right. Because gem install will install it into your machine, but if you want it in your app, you actually have to run bundle install. Generally, you don't need to do gem install. Just run bundle install, and again, I'm going to run faker. Bundle hold on. All right, I'm going to do it backwards. Okay, test development, perfect. So in development, I'm going to say gem faker and just do bundle install. And it will read the gem file in theory. And it helps if I can spell gem. Yay. Okay, so faker is now in our app. And that will allow us to pull in some fake data. So let's have a look at here. I was faker, Ruby gem faker. Here we go. So we have actually a number of things in Faker. Here's the documentation. And here is a bunch of things we can fake data for. And it's pretty funny. Chuck Norris is something DC Comics, food, Greek philosophers. But I kind of like games. So I'm going to click in through Faker : games was here last time I checked. All right, never mind. I'm just go back here and we'll go to Pokemon, because who doesn't like Pokemon? I have no idea what a Pokemon is, but that's okay. All right, so we can generate names, locations, and moves. Perfect. So we want to generate names for our name model. Okay, so let's make sure that it's all going to work properly. And what I'm going to do, run the Rails or console command. So this starts up an IRB instance. Remember last week, I showed you just run IRB and you can run your Ruby code. This runs an IRB instance, but it pulls in all of the Rails information. So if I run Faker, I can see it's being returned to me. So Faker exists. If I do blah, I know blah doesn't exist and it gives me an error. So let's have a look about how we generate a name. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Faker games Pokemon.name.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
So are these packages installed globally with Ruby, or are they?
Yes, they are going to be installed globally. And when you install Ruby, there'll be a little folder on your machine where it will cache all of the gems that you need to have on in your app. Unlike node modules, which are always in your app, they have to be because the way that JavaScript works. However, Ruby, being that it's a backend language only, doesn't have to worry about installing things over the wire and such. So it will install into your Ruby folder. So let's do Faker : games : Pokemon.name. There we go. Tentacruel. Is that a Pokemon? I have no idea. Sounds like a really kind of vicious beast. In any case, so I can tell now that this is all working the way I expect. Okay, but having a list of Pokemon isn't very exciting. Pokemon, let's have create another model. And this model, we're going to create locations. And this is going to be where the Pokemon live, or at least our Pokemon live. Okay, so let's come back here. And rather than do the migration, also note that I'm not running my Rails server right now. You don't have to run your server in order to run the console. Okay, so back here I can do here. There's also, you can also run bin/, and I'm going to run Rails. So bundle exec or bin/. Normally I have what's called an alias that just does the bundle exec part for me, but not this time. So I'm going to generate, and this time instead of generating a model. I'm going to generate what's called a resource. And I'm going to call it location. And the location is going to have a location, location underscore name, which is going to be a string. All right. So here I can see that more files were created than when I just generated a model. A resource is in Rails sort of a superset of model. It's model plus a few extra things. For instance, we have the model file. We also now have a controller. So we have a locations controller. And we've got locations. So we've got a view, we've got a folder for the view. We don't actually have any files in there, but they've created a folder for it. We've got tests. If we want it, we've got helper, a file to put helper functions. And we also have a route. That's kind of exciting. So let's have a look at the routes file. And we go into the config and we go down to routes. And you can see here that we have, it just says resources locations. So it enables us to go to locations in our app. And let me show you how that works. So first thing I need to do is I need to run the migration. You're going to run a lot of migrations when you're developing a Ruby app. And don't worry, if you've already run a migration, it won't run it a second time. It checks the file names. So we'll do /Rails migrate. Perfect. So we've generated our locations. Let's start up my Rails server again. Okay, let's come back here, refresh. Yay, it started. Let's go to /location. Okay, that is interesting. So let's go to locations. Okay, that's actually cool. We have generated a route. So it's now looking for an index action in the locations controller. All right, that's cool. So let's go into that controller. Let me see here. And the way we create an action is with def. This is Ruby after all, and we need an index action, not index error. I am beginning to dislike that. All right. All right, so I have this action. It's not doing anything yet, and that's fine. So let's actually have it do something. So I'm going to okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in all of the locations. I'm going to create an instance variable. And it's going to pull in all of the locations that are in the database. So the next thing I want to do is render it. So I believe locations.all. But before I do that, I need a location. So let's come in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the console. And I'm going to say location dot new colon. Hold on, let me check my notes. Sorry, bear with me for just a moment. All right, let's try this. What did I call it? I've already forgotten. So let's look at the right here. What did I say? Say generate the character, and over here I said generate the. There we go. Location, action not found, blah, blah, blah. What did I call it here? So here is where the definitions of all the tables end up. You never directly edit this file though. This is auto-generated. However, it's a great place to go. There we go, location name. So let's put in a location name. Perfect. I have generated a location. I know that I've generated. I can actually do a location.all. And it is not there. What have I done wrong? Location name. That's a boring way to do it anyways. So let's actually populate this with our seed file. So under database, we have seeds, and here is where we are going to put how we generate data for our database. So let's do that. Let's come over to here and great. So I'm going to put a few puts here. This is like console.log. So I'm going to see this when I run it. And what I can do to add a location is just say location dot create location underscore name is going to be baker dot games, not dot, colon. All right, so let's run the seed. Out of there and run Rails DB :seed. There. So it has now told me that the seed is complete. Great. Let's make sure by going into the console No, not that. Here. Okay, and location dot all. Great. Striaton City. Sure. Why not? Okay, we've got our location. We also have Lever City. Oh, how fascinating.
So just to be clear, that Faker Games Pokemon location, that actually just requested the info from an API, right?
Yes, yes. It didn't like put all of the data for the Pokemon. It didn't give me a Pokedex. So very much like the node modules, it just reaches out to an online database and grabs the information and populates for us. So, okay, we've got a couple of cities here. Location ID 1, and matter of fact, let's do location.count. Perfect, we've got 2 locations. Obviously, having 2 locations is kind of pointless, especially if you're doing a real app. So let's do this. Let's add a bunch more, okay? So remember this from last week? Oh, perfect. Let's make it nice. And perfect. So now I've got 50 more locations in here. Okay, so now I have 2 models. I've got my locations and I've got my my other model, which I call character. Okay, so let's actually create a relationship between these 2. So what I'm going to do is here in the character, I'm going to say belongs to and in the location control, I'm going to say and let me just make sure that, oh, and I also need to do one more thing. And that is actually update my database. So there's a couple things I can do here. I can create a migration to add a column. So, but I'm going to be lazy and just do /Rails DB drop. Okay. Erased all my data. It's fine. I can recreate it again. And I'm going to come into my migrations. Let me see. It is so easy to get lost, okay? And what I'm going to do is put in a t dot references references is going to reference the Just make sure. Character, and I'm going to say ID. Location has many names, validation. Or we could even do better than, no, that should be fine. Let's run our migrations. Perfect. And references characters. Oh, colon characters. Colon character. Get rid of that ID true. Oh, here. Perfect. All right, so now we've got a reference from the location to the character. All right, let's go quickly into our seeds, and we're going to say, I don't know, just going to copy this. And instead of Pokemon.location, I'll say Pokemon.name, and we'll say character. It's got to be uppercase, perfect. And I can also put in right. I can also give a character not a location name. It's going to be a, what did I call it? Oh my gosh. See how easy it is to get confused here? Right, so let's go into my create characters, and I said name. Perfect. All right, and I'm just going to create random associations. Luckily, Rails understands that we're going to do this often, and all I have to do is that should populate. Also, let's do power. We'll just do rand 1 to 10. Okay, let's run our seeds. Seed. Comma. Yeah, comma and comma.
So John, right now you're making 2 tables.
Yep, I am populating
Yeah.
2 tables, and it's saying undefined local variable name locations. Always get my location. Oh, maybe I mucked up this. I did muck that up because characters don't have a location. Locations have characters. All right, I'm just going to remove that then. Reference is a character. Right, so you have to get your head around how you want all your data set up. And obviously I did not do a very good job, but that is okay. We'll go back to the seeds, and instead of here, we'll say No, I still needed that. And I need another end. Okay, and we'll put, because I said a location references the character, right? So character is going to be character dot sample, and I have to do this in the right order because obviously the characters need to exist for me to create a reference to them. And I have one too many ends. Unexpected character call up. One last time. Break aborted. Everybody hates me. Location, locations, characters. 9. Character is character stuff. Oh, I know what I need to do. I have to define it because it doesn't have. There we go. And all right. This singular and plural will kill me at some point. Undefined method each. Okay. Here's what I am going to do. Look at my name, level, all right. All right, I tell you what, let's take a 10-minute break. I'll get my data all working, and you can come back at say 1/4 and we'll continue the lecture. I did prep for this. I just want everybody to know I did prep. There we go. Thanks, love.
Hey, John.
Ah.
Sorry to scare you. Didn't mean to scare you. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to mention I got to leave a bit early to pick up my son.
That's all good.
I'll just drop off quietly.
All good. Life is important. Sons are important.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks a lot, John.
No worries. No, you must stay. No, of course, go pick up.
just playing it safe, you know.
No, I absolutely get it. All right, another minute and we'll start. Allison, Joe. All right, I got everything fixed. Let me just go over everything just so it is clear. Sometimes you just need to take a step back and look at things. It's hard to do that and talk and code at the same time. So so I have characters and I've got locations. Got these characters, Pokemon name. We've got, I've given them a level, and this is how you reference the location. So it's colon location, foreign key true, index true. And that's what I was missing a little earlier. So I've created that character. And then here I've got location. So location is just has a string. So a location can have many characters. And that is how everything is set up in the database. And if we actually come have a look at the models, once again, the character belongs to a location, and a location has many character. So the whole plural and singular is, again, it's a Rails thing. They say it makes things simpler. I tend to disagree, but hey, I also didn't write a framework that a large number of Fortune 500 companies use. So maybe I'm in the wrong. Any case, we have our models, and I'm in the console here, and I can actually do character dot first just to make sure that I have a character in there. Yep, there's Ivysaur and location dot. Okay, and I have this location is Snowbell City. Now this is kind of interesting. I can actually do let's go to the character dot first dot location. And you'll see that the location that that character belongs to shows up. So I have direct access to that. Okay, so now I've got my models. I've got the relationship between the models. Let's now render this onto the screen so I don't have this red and black error coming up. So in order to do that, I am going to come over to the locations controller. I've got this index action, which just pulls all the locations, and I am going to give them to an instance variable called, surprisingly enough, locations. Now, it's still going to have an error, and that is because it has no view. So I'm going to do the easy part first. Let's say I just want JSON. And what I can do is render. Once again, John is going to check his notes before he makes a fool of himself. Controllers, planets. Yeah, render. Nope, not that. Render colon JSON. No, sorry, not colon JSON. JSON colon at locations. All right. So this will allow me to render my locations in up here so that I can access them via an API. And there we go. All of the locations are here. And that is excellent. So now all of you know how to create a React application that can then call on this API endpoint in order to grab the information that you need for these particular towns or cities. Heart Home City, Twin Leaf Town. I have never played a Pokemon game. Okay, but Rails also does front-end rendering. And we can actually set it to do either render to HTML or render to JSON. The way we do that is a little bit different. We do respond onto do format. All right. And I have to put in an end. So let me do that here. And I'm just going to change this out a bit. Instead of render JSON, I'm going to say format.json. Here. When in doubt, copy and paste from your cheat sheet. Yeah. So we're going to format JSON. We're going to render the JSON locations. But let's also render out some HTML. And oh, I thought you had all disappeared. Okay, maybe not. Maybe it's just me. All right, so super. Okay, so let's put in a format.html and just leave that. So what this is going to do is it's going to look for an HTML document, and it's going to look for it in a particular location. It's going to look for it in a file called index.html.erb in the locations view. So let's come all the way down here to views, locations, and create an index.html.erb. ERB stands for embedded Ruby, just like the EJS, which was embedded JavaScript from earlier on. So let's create a quick, let's just do one. So for now, I'm just going to render the word locations, and it is still coming back there. Oh, gotta save. It's taking a moment, and perfect. So now it is going to text. If I add .json on here, it will return to me the JSON. So let's actually output what we see there. So in here, in this locations or index.js in locations, I only need to put in, let's put in, this is going to look a little bit familiar. We're going to create a UL. No, just a UL. And in here, we're going to create an li for each of those locations. So instead of doing it the React way, which is just a pair of curly braces, we use what we call alligators, which are more difficult to type, but that's okay. And we could put in code in here and it will actually run the Ruby in here. So we're going to say at locations dot each. Where is that locations coming from? It's coming from the controller. So up here in the controller, I have created this locations, so I have access to it inside the view. So do t, and I'm going to put in an end. And inside here, I'm going to put another alligator. It looks a little bit different because I'm actually rendering something with this. And I just put a % equals, and then I could put t dot location, I think it is. Let's come back and have a look.
Is that the same as EJS, more or less?
Yeah, more or less, except that you don't, you use, yeah, actually, I haven't used EJS very much, but yeah, very much so. Let's tidy that up and let's come back here and let's make sure that it indeed works. Perfect. Okay, so my UL, oh, right, because I didn't put these in LIs. So let's do that. There, and great. I now have all of the locations set. Now, a character belongs to a location. Let me make sure I'm not lying to you. Yes, character belongs to a location. So let's come back up to this locations controller. And we can, or better yet, you know what, we'll skip that for now, but this is basically how you do things. This is rendering the HTML on the back end and then sending the pre-rendered HTML through to the front end. Unlike baseline React, which just sends data over and it's assembled on the front end. So that's an important difference between the two. Okay. Right, let's actually, so there's two things you can do to see all the routes in your app. The first is you can run bin slash, I think it's rake. I think you need to do rake for this one. Rake routes. No, it's route. Oh, there's a way to do it from the command line, but it's not as good as this way, which is in development. If you pass in a route that doesn't exist, it will say routing error. Where did you intend to go? And this is actually super handy because now we can assess how we add and remove and access all of these conditions. So not only do I have an endpoint at /locations, I also have a new location path, an edit location path. All of these paths are automatically created for me. So all of the standard CRUD operations are created on the locations when I just add the little bit to the controller and to the model, and it's all done for me. And that's pretty handy. I'm going to show you one other way of creating an endpoint, and this is, it's not used very often in industry, but if you want to get something up and running quickly, you can do this. So I'm going to do a bin/Rails generate scaffold. And we're going to call this power. And we're going to say power has a title, which is a string. This generates a lot of things. Let's run the migration. Perfect. Okay, and let's come back to our routes. And if I refresh, notice now that I've got a bunch more routes, but even better, and hopefully this blows you away. Go to powers. And now I have an actual interface created. So I have, this is the index endpoint, and I can add a new power. I could give it the title. So I'm going to say, I don't know, Thunderbolt. My kids always ask me to play the Pokemon card game. Okay, so power was successfully created. We can go back. We can edit that. So Thunderbolt 2, update the power, back. We could destroy it. Okay, let's create another one. Create this power, back, and we can click on the show, and this brings us to the page that has been generated directly for this particular action. And normally you don't want to do all of this. You don't want to necessarily create them exactly like this. However, running scaffold once or twice gives you a really good idea of how you can access the data. So let's have a look at the powers controller that was created. Remember when I created the locations controller, it was empty. This powers controller has all of the actions. So I've got an index action, power.all, a show action doesn't do anything because we don't need anything in there. We can create a new power. There's the edit. We can do create, and here is where we manipulate the data. So in a model view controller, the view speaks with the controller that gets its information from the model. And this is how it does it and responds. Okay, let's go into the power model. Notice that there's nothing in here, so I'm going to add something. I'm not going to associate powers with Pokemon right now, but what I am going to do is I'm going to say validate presence of, and we can say title. Right. So just adding that one line. Well, now if I come back here, not title. What did I call it? I am the worst at remembering these things. models. Let's go into the database, into the migrations. And we're looking at that's done. And title. See? All right. Oh. That should work. Perfect. So if I try and create a new power and not put anything in there, it gives me the error. So title can't be blank. So that is pretty handy. And using these methods that I've gone over, you can quite easily create an entire application. So I'm going to recommend to all of you, if you go to the rubyonrails.org, watch this video. This is the infamous DHH, the head person for life of Rails development. And he creates an entire blog in 30 minutes using the tools that I've just shown you. You can post to the blog, you can comment on the blog. It's pretty amazing, this video. What else can I go over? So you're going to notice these JBuilder files. And this is how we get the information into our into JSON format. And you'll notice that it's calling a partial powers power. And anything that looks like that is a partial, and all partials start with an underscore. And what a partial is a piece of code that is introduced into another page. So very similar to a component in React. This is a partial. The partial then extracts all that information. ID, title, created at, updated at, and provides it for us. So let's actually go back to powers, and we'll just do powers.json, and bingo, our lightning power is there. All right. So in the real world, you're never going to use scaffold. But at this point in your career, I'm going to recommend that you try it once or twice and get things set up. It doesn't look pretty, but it's absolutely functional. All right. I am going to stop here for a bit and ask if there are any questions.
Yeah, John, how do we add styles to this? Do we have like a public folder?
Okay, no, excellent question. When you create a resource or a scaffold like I just did, if you come up into assets, style sheets, and each of these separate, these are SAS, this is SAS, which you know, and each of these have, hold on, don't open over there. Let's do that one more time with feeling. So this is where you would put all your styles for locations. Let me go to powers actually, because so just so you can see what I mean, and then we'll say, I don't know. Let's inspect. What's it called? We've got the notice, we got the, and we got a table. Great, okay. All right, so let's go and just add a body. Body and I know background color, Rebecca No. Favorite color. Okay, and if we come back here and refresh, and it didn't work, why didn't it work? Save. Save. Sure, everything's saved. I think I may have to restart the app. Hold on.
And also, do we have something like a Nodemon on like for this one?
So no, because React is always rendered on the front end, you have access directly to the browser to do refreshes, which is how, right. Rails S will just keep running. And as long as you're not making configuration changes, you should be absolutely fine. All right, I'm going to just change this to H1. See if I can target that. There we go. It hit. So let's change that from background color to color. Normally, I don't do any of the styling or the HTML on the Rails side. I just use it plainly just for an API. And it's actually quite good at doing an API. But I'm probably can tell a big fan of React in the front end. Anything else? Yeah, no worries. No worries. Anything else? Have I gone over enough? Yes, I have. I have gone over everything I made a note about. And I don't want to make your heads explode with giving you more than you need. So I think this is enough for you to get started with your Jungle project this week. Most of the mentors, it's kind of funny. You have the JavaScript mentors and you have the Rails mentors. And people gravitate towards one or the other. I happen to do a little bit of both, mostly front end, but some back end. So use the mentors, especially at the beginning. Using Rails, learning Rails is a little bit of a hockey stick. And what I mean by that is it's actually pretty simple until you get to a certain point, then all of a sudden it goes vertical. So I've gone over a lot of the simple bits. Don't worry about it getting too difficult. It's actually, a lot of people really love Ruby, and I don't mind it. It's just context switching, right? So write a little bit of Ruby and then you forget how to write JavaScript, and vice versa. But that's not necessarily a drawback or the fault of Ruby. Ruby is an excellent language. I love how everything's an object. All right.
Hey, so John,
Yeah,
can I just ask something?
sure.
So you're bouncing between like 3 files, right? Like there's the model, or sorry, 3 folders. There's the model folder,
Yep.
controllers, and migrate.
Yeah, those are the
And
main
was
ones.
locations a folder?
Locations is a folder underneath views. So I have this views locations
Oh, yeah.
here. Models has it just a file, and controllers also just has a file. There are a lot of files in a Ruby app. Here, let me just,
And
yeah.
so, and when you were in the Rails environment,
Mm-hmm.
you're using that to generate let's say like the locations.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And to interact with the SQL, like to do queries and stuff like that.
yeah, it's very powerful for that. Okay. Let me quickly show you a real production app that I'm working on right now. And here you see the names of the folders. Most of them are exactly the same as you saw. There are a few more controllers than you are used to, but not that many. But there are a lot of models, billion models in here. I counted 1 billion. And this is a SQL query that I'm working on today, and it's already blowing my brain. It's a 242-line SQL query. I didn't write it. It's not my fault.
And what is that SQL query in? Is it in the controllers folder?
So that is actually, so you do have access to direct SQL if you need to have a specific query. So there are a lot of tables in our app, and this is calculates a, there are a million joins here. So it pulls out a certain amount of information about certain bits. And I'm trying to simplify it because yeah, I'm pretty sure if I put that in front of any of you, you understand at least most of the words, but so, and it's also takes way too long to run. So I'm trying to make it faster. Okay.
Okay, so the controllers is kind of like where all the data manipulation happens. Is that right?
That is where data is prepared for the views. The views could be API views where it's just JSON. So for instance, I have locations and characters, and a character belongs to a location. So I wouldn't necessarily have a characters controller, but I could pull up the characters inside the locations controller because that's where I need that information. So the controllers are for preparing the data for the views. It's not necessarily a one-to-one-to-one relationship between the three. So try not to think about it like that. A lot of people do, at least at the beginning. It's more, okay, what information do I need to present to this user? And how do I manipulate it?
So it's like very different from Express where you're setting up endpoints. You're kind of using a commands to generate them, and it kind of
you get endpoints for free just by running, you know, you could create a scaffold or a resource and you get your endpoints, and then you can go into your controller to say, how do I display the information for this endpoint?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's just really different.
Yeah, clear as mud, I believe is the term. Don't sweat it. Rails is nowhere near the hardest thing you're going to have to do as a developer. Okay, before I let you all go for the day, there is a lecture that's coming up in a couple of weeks, which is basically advanced. It says advanced topics, and it gives me very little guidance. So rather than me coming up with something, how about people Slack inside the class channel at me, so, and say what you want me to present. What do you want to learn about? rather than me coming up with something. Okay, so think about it and Slack me in the channel. I'm more than happy. I will keep my eye on the channel. And yeah, all right. Thank you all. I think that's it for today.
Thank you.
I don't think I'm seeing you next week, but I will have office hours. So come by, say hi. I get lonely. All right, my friends.
Thanks,
All right,
John.
thanks,
Thank
John.
you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for your patience.